In question 5, we're told that we have 3 statements about exhaling, and we have to work out which of them are correct. So we have our 3 statements here, which at a cursory glance appear to refer to both the moving of the ribs, the moving of the diaphragm muscles, and the pressure in the lungs. So in order to answer this question and to quickly establish which of these are correct, it requires a basic understanding of what ties all of these together. And that's what goes on in the thorax, i.e. within the chest, upon inhalation and exhalation. So the thing to understand is that inhalation and exhalation rely on air moving down a pressure gradient, either into or out of the lungs. So let's model our inhalation and exhalation of the lungs. So we can imagine the lungs as sort of like sponge, where during inhalation, of course, it swells up with air, and during exhalation, the air is emptied out. So, given the basic principle that we've described here, that the movement of air from the outside environment into the lungs or out of the lungs requires a pressure gradient, we should know that in inhalation, what we want to do is generate a low pressure within the lungs, and therefore air will move from a region of high pressure into the lungs, the region of lower pressure. So, what we can do to lower the pressure is to increase the volume of the thorax, so that for a given amount of air within the thorax, there'll be a higher volume and therefore a lower pressure. So what are the sort of things we can do to increase the volume? Well, one of them would be to contract the diaphragm such that it lies flat. That increases the amount of space within the thorax. Other things we can do, perhaps, would be related to the accessory muscles of breathing, and there is where the ribs come in. But let's move on to exhalation before we come to our 3 statements. Similarly, what we're going to be doing is generating a pressure differential. So you want air to be moving out of the lungs, so you want the pressure to be higher within the lungs than the outside environment, so we need to generate a high pressure within the lungs, and therefore we can do that by generating a low volume. So what we can do is allow the diaphragm to rest to its dome-like relaxed position, therefore decreasing the space within the thorax. What else we can do is, for instance, as in statement 1, allow the ribs to swing down and inwards, therefore compressing the space within the thorax during exhaling. So we can say that this is correct. Moving on to statement 2, we've already established that the diaphragm muscles contract during inhalation to maximise space within the thorax, so that's wrong. And finally, since we've already talked about the pressure in the lungs, we should say that, of course, the pressure in the lungs does increase during exhaling because we want to generate a pressure differential that will drive air out of the lungs. So statement 3 is correct. So we can say our answer is that statements 1 and 3 are correct, and that gives us our answer, option E.